rolling?
Okay. So I thought before I ask you questions, I was wondering if you could reminiscent your time in LA together.
That's what ever since the idea that this thing came about, I've been, I don't remember when you came out there, man. You just seemed like you just automatically were there sometime, but I can't remember, was that in the 70s or the 80s?
I came out in the 80s, and I actually, it was a little bit before I met you. I mean, before I met you out there.
Yeah.
Because I came out around, it was February of 80, and I don't know if you remember, it was flooding out there in February. It was really, there was a lot of mudslides, and people thought I brought the rain from Louisiana out there, But I met you, I think it might have been either later that year or in '81, and you invited me to come over to the house.
So do you remember where you lived around that time?
I lived in West Hollywood. West Hollywood, right off of Melrose, about a block.
Okay,
from
all right.
Melrose.
Now that gives me a better perspective, because I remember. I remember that, because I remember coming to your house one time, and I was shocked that they didn't have no lights in there.
Well, they had lights, they just weren't being used.
That's what I mean. It was dark in there. And I said, right, this cat, well, he don't need no light. I'm fumbling around in his house, and he got all that recording equipment in his house, and with no lights to see that.
Yeah,
That was the first real awareness I came, of your life inside.
And then I think, I can't remember if you let me know that Tammy was out there.
Yeah, I probably ran it down on everybody that was out there.
Yeah, and then eventually I met Victor Serker.
Oh yeah, Victor was still out there.
Yeah, and then John, is it John Boudreaux? Yeah, he was out there. I think he had been living out there for a long time.
Oh yeah, he came out when the Air Force first came out there. We had, we went out there in back in the '60s or something, and he was one of the few cats that was still there, because Chuck Bailey had come back home, and Ray Tyler had left.
Wow.
All of them had left, and Melvin had left and went to New York. And for a long time, Tammy's left too. She came back.
Yeah, she was with Doug at the time.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of drama there.
Oh man, yeah.
There was a lot of theater.
Yeah.
But you decided that there was, enough people out there to put a group together. And I remember. I think you might have come to some of my gigs, and.
Well, yeah, I remember coming to your gigs. I was really fascinated with your career at that time, because you really impressed me as a unique player, and how you need to be on the record, but I didn't know how to put you on it.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that one of the first things that I realized about you was you reminded me in some ways of Alvin, and that you were able to figure out, what to do with talent and how to make people give more than they thought they had. And because I remember, in some of the rehearsals that we had with the Natives, and that the Natives was the name of the band that you put together. It was a wonderful thing to watch and to see how you molded the kind of rhythmic concept that you wanted, and it was fun.
Well, it was fun to me, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just trying to do something that I like, that felt like it was going to be, felt like something I liked, man. And when I was putting that group together, that was something that Earl Palmer really asked me to do.
Ah, okay.
See, because the cat who was going to do that little series of shows, Bill Bentley, he had.
That's right. Yes.
He had contacted Earl Palmer when he knew he wanted to do something in New Orleans.
Right.
And Earl Palmer said, "Well, look, man, I ain't the cat that can do that now. He probably too busy making sessions anyway."
That's right. Yeah.
So he said, "You ought to call Harold Battiste," and that's how Bill Bentley found me. He didn't know me. He found me and told me what he wanted to do, and then I started trying to put together a band of New Orleans cats, man. I knew that's all it took.
It was a good band, man.
Yes,
I mean,
man.
Tammy was doing the singing, the female singing. I did some singing.
Yeah.
And remember we we did those gigs at the Lingerie.
Yeah, well, that was the whole point.
Yeah.
The Lingerie was, was a target place, and
Right.
it came off with, and putting the band together, man. Like cats like you were so versatile and could do so much, till I didn't have to worry about much of who else I could concentrate on. Like, now who's a tenor player who could do remember all of these tunes and the That's how Jerry Drummondville.
Drummondville, that's right.
See, Jerry Drummondville could play all of Lee Allen solos and everything,
That's right. That's right. I forgot about Jerry.
Yeah, and so it was a gas putting together the band, and I knew I had to compromise with a lot of things, but for what we had to do, I sort of felt like spirit was the only thing. That was the thing that really happened. If we could have the right spirit on about doing it, then people would go crazy about it.
Yeah, and they usually did.
They sure did, man.
We used to, you might remember the night that I think both Ricky Lee Jones and Bonnie,
Bonnie Raitt?
Bonnie Raitt came out, and now I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was Bonnie got up there and she was going to sing, and we were playing a blues, and she opened her mouth and nothing came out. Amazing. But I think she's in a better state these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was great, because a lot of people who were celebrated personalities got to hear that kind of music.
Yeah.
I mean, probably in some way, some circumstances for the first time.
Yeah, and what amazed me too is every weekend when we did that, I guess it was like on Friday or something, that how many people were coming out of the woodworks, looked like
right.
man, all over Los Angeles. We'd have lines around the block until about midnight. People still trying to get in there.
That's right. That's right.
And we got press. I mean, I had never got that much press out there, but every week, the leading paper would have an article about us. What was going on out there. It was just amazing what you all did. Well, what we all did, because I played with you. I played too.
That's right.
Harold, did that also connect you back with New Orleans?
Oh yeah, that was the whole thing. I mean, as far as I was concerned, it was like, going home every weekend.
That's right.
To do what we do, and we did it like that. We did it, we didn't have no arrangements, nothing written down and all that stuff. We just
right. But at that time, it really was the only time for some of us to really play New Orleans music, because I was doing a little bit of studio work, and most of it was, way off off into something else. And I was fortunate that I had gotten with producers that, you know, at least thought I had enough talent, you know, to do that kind of work. But I mean, the lingerie and all and the other gigs that we played.
Oh yeah, we sure did.
Because we did, I think we did the Long Beach Blues Festival. We backed up. We backed up Earl King a couple of times, I think. Ernie Cato came out there.
Yeah. Lee Dorsey came out there.
Yeah, Lee Dorsey, that's right.
Came. Benny Spellman came out there.
That's right.
I mean, we had a parade of New Orleans acts out there, man.
Yes, indeed. It was fun, man.
I remember when the Nevilles came out there. Even 1 week we had the Nevilles out there.
Yeah.
We had almost everybody that was alive.
Anybody who was anybody.
Yeah, it came out there, man. And,
yeah.
But it amazed me that many people in Los Angeles came out to this New Orleans thing. That was the first time I realized they had a lot of people out there either were from New Orleans or admired what did happen in New Orleans.
That's right. That's right.
Do you think that you experienced a greater appreciation there than back here?
Well, I didn't think about it that way, but I know it was, to me, it was a more of a response. You know, I mean, because the difference between there and here was that we were like unique there.
That's right.
But here we would have just been another band.
That's right. That's right. Well, you know, and that was before. That was before places like the House of Blues.
Oh yeah, that was before.
You know, and before anybody really had any. I mean, because most of the places out there were like pop and punk and what was it? A new wave, not new age, but new wave, and so there was nothing else like that in LA at the time, and especially on that level.
Yeah.
You know, that
right
professional level.
Right on there. And here's a club. To me, anyway, right on Sunset Boulevard. I mean,
Yeah.
All that was built in. We're on Sunset Boulevard in the middle of Hollywood. And here we are there playing it with the New Orleans natives.
That's right.
And playing it like I read an article just now. I was looking up some stuff for him. There was an article that had been in the Times, the Los Angeles Times, and that's where that phrase came. He said, their first set, what did they say?
The New Orleans Gyps, the New Orleans
No, he said that the first set, he said something about the first set. In that first paragraph, he said something about the first set was introduced rowdy and something like that, how rowdy we were playing.
Yeah, you know, it was really, what is that?
It says virile and rowdy.
Virile and rowdy.
Yeah. Well, it was the only way they could really explain it.
Exactly,
you know,
but he was right.
Yeah, and see, everybody was from New Orleans, so it's very different from when you go to a town and you have to work with, you know, whoever they have, and they say, oh, he's a great New Orleans player. Well, you know, you just have to go on their judgment sometimes, and you don't get what they're saying you got. You know, these guys, everybody was familiar with everything, all the New Orleans music, and so, you know, we could play like we were playing in New Orleans. It was wonderful.
I talked to Harold earlier, you know, in our conversations we had over the past years, and also talked about his reasons why he left New Orleans. Henry, what were your reasons to leave New Orleans?
Well, I left New Orleans in 1980, and I had taught here for 3 years. I had a private teaching practice. I had trained and worked with some theater companies here. I was playing in nightclubs. I was playing in hotels. I was pretty much doing, anything that I wanted to do, or anything that my exposure had given me the realization of. I mean, I was definitely doing a lot of stuff here, but there was no recording industry to speak of here in the late 70s, early 80s, and really, frankly, there's no recording industry to speak of here now. It's probably a little better than it was back in those days, but I knew to get to the next level I had to get out of town. So I had debated going to New York, and then I decided that I'd go to Los Angeles because I felt that the life and lifestyle and all that was a little easier, and the weather was warmer, and so I took that and went out there. I really didn't know. I guess I did know that Harold was out there. I did know that Harold was out there. But I hadn't spent a lot of, appreciable time with Harold before then. I had seen him and met him a few times, with other musicians, and but we hadn't really hung out, hadn't really spent a lot of time together. So when I got out there, I was really hoping that that might happen, and eventually it did.
Mm-hmm. So Harold, those were different. You are about 20 years older than Henry,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously Henry left for very different reasons than you did back then.
Oh yeah,
Times have changed.
It was different times, 'cause when did I leave? I left in the 50s.
Late 50s.
I left in the 50s, yeah. He left in the 70s, no? Yeah.
I left in the
Over
80,
20 years.
1980.
Over 20 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was making, when I left New Orleans, I was probably making more money than a lot of the musicians here. It was a matter of just reaching out and wanting to expand to a different level. And I think that's really the same reason why most people leave New Orleans today. It's certainly the reason why, it's the same reason that Louis Armstrong left New Orleans, way back many decades ago. Same thing.
For opportunities.
Yeah.
You realize that, that there are many more opportunities at other places.
Right.
If you're equipped to have, if you believe you can invade that. And that's the same thing. We left because Ornette Coleman had sent a bus ticket down here for Blackwell, and we figured we could qualify if we got out there and they heard us play. And that's what, to my surprise, because I had never been anywhere like that far away from home. And I found out that there were opportunities, and for what he said, I think Henry said something a while ago about not realizing what your value might be if you've never been exposed to anything. And that's the way I was. I didn't know what I could do or what it was worth. And that was one of the key things that kept me with Sonny so much, because he had so much confidence in me. He would always probe me to do things that I didn't think I could do.
Yeah. And even now, even with schools like this one having an industry program, there's really very few, if any, people who can tell you or who can at least give you an idea of what what your value or what you have, what that's worth. And even if they tell you what it's worth, there's really not a whole lot you can do with it or about it until you leave.
Well, hopefully, when you mention something like that, I'm still optimistic that sooner or later, New Orleans or this environment is going to realize that, and they're doing some things. You know,
Yeah.
more movies are being made here, and they're trying to get themselves up to snuff the way other southern cities have done.
Yeah. Well, you gotta, I mean, you got movies that are being done here, but you gotta use more local talent in order to make it really work. And you've got to, the stream has to get a little, the economic stream has to get a little larger.
Oh yeah.
If you can sum it up, what do you think are the factors in New Orleans that are not enabling talents, that's hindering the development of talent?
The
city, what are the reasons?
I mean, who are you asking?
Both of you.
Oh, okay, good. And what's the question one more time?
The
I'm sorry.
question is, what if you, because we just talked about that you as talents had to move out of the city
Yes.
to value yourself and your talent. What do you think are if you can sum it up, what are the reasons for this here in the city?
Well, this is, as I told another reporter recently, this is the richest, poorest city that I've ever been in. And I mean, it's not that there isn't money here. It just doesn't get into the stream that reaches the masses. So with all this talent that is here, you've got to, in my opinion, you've got to get the money into situations where you can build outlets for not only recording locals, that is, but true, I mean, really good publicity outlets. You've got a lot of people who can play music, but they learned mostly by rote. So they need to be able to learn how to perhaps read so that they can have a little more of a balanced approach. Otherwise, you know, they can't go to a studio in New York and work with unknown composers and do the session justice. You have people coming from NOCA, but you know, that's not enough. It's just not. It's not enough for a true industry city. I mean, you have hundreds of people and maybe a few, couple of thousand people in Nashville who can read, and they can keep a studio. They can keep a studio climate going. We don't. It's not there in New Orleans yet. And the people that you're training at schools like NOCA, there's no reason for them to stay around right now.
Well, you know, that makes me think, though, and I see it a little differently than Henry sees it, and what he's saying is so. But I think that I'd rather look into developing what we do have that they don't have other places. The fact that the spirit of this music seems to be stronger than the educational component. And I noticed my experience out in Los Angeles was that I got kids, young people out of North Texas State, great musicians, I noticed that the studios were full of great educated people, but the ones who could play got stuck in the studio. So you get cat who could play and do everything, and he could make. Randy Watts made all kind of money out there.
Right.
And cats like that can make a lot of money doing that if your focus gets on doing that. I always felt that New Orleans has a history and a background of people whose spirit is what made them happen.
Yeah, you know, I agree.
It wasn't that Louis Armstrong was such a great reader, but his spirit converted to Duke Ellington Band, who was a bunch of readers.
You know, I agree with you, but, you know, at the same time, even regardless of what, I mean, if you look at today or if you look at 1980s or 1990s or 5 years from now, the climate here, in the climate here, you're going to have people who are enthusiastic, who are passionate, who are spirited in their music. But past playing on the street with the brass bands, past playing in Snug Harbor, past doing an occasional recording session, they're going to have to do something else. They're going to have to teach.
Yeah.
They're going to have to, some of these people work in, you know, menial jobs just to you know, keep things going. So if you don't want to do that, you're going to have to leave right now. Hopefully in 10, 15, 20 years, you might have a different general environment here. You know, what we're not saying that New Orleans is bad or good, or we're just saying that it is what it is.
What is it? You said earlier the richest and the poorest city. Could you maybe
Well, it is.
elaborate that a little bit?
It's the richest, poorest city because the people who do have the money here, they're holding on to it. And so the actual economic stream is very, very small. It's very narrow. You know, it only gets to anybody outside of that Caucasian element that has the money. They may get the figures that I read some years ago was less than 1% of the money that comes in here. So that's not something that's going to build a real industry here.
What do you think about the appreciation for jazz in the city and the fact that this is the birthplace of jazz and that the elite of the city is not pushing it? Other elites would probably in other cities if that's such a culture.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Next door, you have the state of Mississippi. All of a sudden, Mississippi has become really interested in promoting their blues history and their blues tradition. And if you go to Mississippi today, you're going to see all kinds of blues trails, all kinds of tributes to people who were born in Mississippi who contributed to the blues tradition. Now I'm going to ask you, what do you have in New Orleans that is equivalent to that?
Nothing.
Well, that's the point. You see, you don't have, people are so busy trying to keep what resources they have and put it into whatever they want to put it into. You know, it's, you want to call this a cultural city, but it has to be you have to stimulate and you have to support culture to keep culture.
That's true. Well, the city tore down Louis Armstrong's birthplace in 1972, and
Well, tell me what happened to that house.
I think it's
Well, you know, I mean, so they put a wrecking ball to that house.
yeah.
And, I mean, they didn't want to have a memory of Louis Armstrong's place. And,
Why?
and he understood that, and he understood that long before that. And that's why he brought his stuff to Queens.
So
And
what is your take on this? Why
Well,
would
yeah.
a city with such an incredible cultural treasure like being the birthplace of jazz?
All I can see is that we're crippled because of the dual culture. You know, New Orleans had opera way back
That's right.
before New York had an opera.
Right.
It has a European history and a small amount of people that feel that that's their culture of the city, so that they continue to think that, you know, there was an old saying that about Jesus, that nothing good could come out of Nazareth. I don't know if you ever heard that old saying, but it implies that nothing good can come out of the ghetto, or out of the black community. When an art form comes out of the black community, it's not an art form; it's an entertainment form.
And that's the way they treat New
And that's
Orleans
the way
jazz.
they treat it, like entertainment. They don't treat it like art. And that's what still has us falling behind places like Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee, and all of them places like that, and Memphis and all that. Is that these people have bona fide reason to believe that their art is the real art.
You know, when Eddie Bo died recently, I was curious as to why there was very little publicity about the fact that he had passed on. And, you know, and the best thing that we, you know, the people of color here compared to, you know, where the money really is, they do what they can from an emotional standpoint to support the people who are passing on. They do the second lines, they do the memorial services, and they do what they can, but you know, the bottom line is there could be a museum, there could be all kinds of things that really you would find in a place of culture, you would find in a place that really supported its culture. You know, right now it only comes up when you want bragging rights. You know what I mean? It comes up when the city wants to lure tourists. And my thing is, okay, you're bringing in $7 to $8 billion a year in tourist money, maybe taxes, and I don't know how much of that actually stays here, but if they're issuing those kinds of numbers in writing, I'm assuming that a lot of that stays here, maybe all of it. And what are you doing with that money? You know, where's it going? I mean, there's nothing to show for it. You know, I mean, the French Quarter is still what it is. You know, there's just nothing.
I have another analogy here between, you know, you just mentioned there is no jazz museum. The birthplace of jazz, it doesn't have a jazz
You
museum.
know, that surprised me about a year ago, about a year and a half ago. I was looking in the telephone book for jazz museums, and I found every kind of museum except jazz. Voodoo museum,
Right.
football museum, all those different kinds of museums.
World War II museum.
World War II museum.
That's right.
All that's in there.
And you know, my feeling about the World War II museum is it's needed somewhere, but in New Orleans?
Yeah, there's no real reason. Yeah, why is it? Why here? Yeah, why? Just let's think about this for a second, because it's very interesting. Why, although there's no real reason here to have one, but there is one, and there is no jazz museum. Why do you think that is?
You know, I brought that up in a Creole, in a seminar on Creole culture at Tulane a few years ago. And some people thought that it was because of the class, you know, the conflict in the different classes. And some other people said, you know, it was other things, and some people thought it was racial, and frankly, I think it's a little bit of all of that. You know, you know, unfortunately, over the years, the blacks generally haven't had enough money or had enough of a desire to think about a museum for the people, or to celebrate the people that came from, you know, their group. And the whites just didn't care. So, you know, and like most things in New Orleans,
May I interrupt you?
Yes.
Because you just said something I would like to link into. The whites didn't care. I'm not sure, you know, of course, that might be one aspect of it, but I'm asking you now, what about the memory connected to a World War II museum, the national memory connected to a World War II museum, and the national memory connected to what might be, hopefully one day, a jazz museum?
So, I'm not sure I'm getting your question.
Who would want to remember that?
Well,
as a group of people.
the society, you know, I mean, it's clear why they have a World War II museum. The United States were the victors of World War II. They were the great liberators of the fascist countries, and that is the memory connected to that museum.
Yes.
But what memory would be connected to a jazz museum?
Well, let's start with this. I'm sorry.
May I ask you, who do you think would remember a jazz museum?
Who would?
Whose memory would be affected by a jazz museum?
That's a good question.
I know it's a good question. You know what a good question is? Question that you don't want to answer.
Well, when I talk about memory, it's the society. You know, what do they connect with it? You know,
Well,
because nothing happens coincidentally.
But you know, I'll give you a little story. A guy called me once when this was after I'd done some recordings for MCA and a couple of other companies, and the guy says, "Man, we want you to help us to raise some money, or no, we want you to come out and help us to talk to Entergy about funding some kind of an arts project and maybe doing a complex building, something like that." And I said, "Well, why do you want to get Entergy to fund this project?" Because, man, you know, they have the money. So I said to him, I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you call me back when you want the people who will benefit from this to raise the money. Because what I've realized over the years is you keep going to these people, asking them for money and asking them for this and that, and when they get ready to cut it off, they just cut it off. And if you have been crippled by going to these other people, you know, asking for money, that's just your butt, you know. And so he never called me back. And this is one of the challenges that we have in a city like New Orleans. People of color need to find a way to make some things happen before we go to other people outside of our situation, because you know it's so easy for a group to be taken for granted, and it's so easy for any group that has power or that is in control of certain things to feel that they only will use what you have to their own ends. And that's the way I see what happens here in New Orleans. We, people of color, created the cuisine here, but they don't make the money from it. People here, people of color, created the first, jazz music here, but they don't really make the money from it. And you could cite a lot of things like that. And so, when some of us leave the city, all of a sudden we realize that there's a certain kind of freedom that you just didn't have in New Orleans. The freedom to go out and, make deals, freedom to, you can make deals when you live here, but the deals that you make need to be outside the city, except for, just the day-to-day stuff, club deals and, occasional, maybe some private things, you want to call that a deal. So, it's just, once you get out, you start to realize that you have more latitude. And people always told me that, but I never really believed it until I, left the first time and went to Los Angeles. And then I also realized it again after I left, after Katrina. There's a different world out there. The music isn't the same in all these other places, but I always felt that, and I still feel that I can come back and get my battery recharged and then go out again.
Well, I think, Harold, would you like to say do you have a last comment on?
I'll make a comment, but it's a very, very big situation, a very big problem, and it's an old problem, and I don't think that we can really offer solutions to it. It may take another generation or two to solve it, because it has many aspects, and it has many aspects to this, and it's very difficult to see all of those things, right, immediately, unless you come up with another Jesus or some kind of guru or somebody that can be like that. But if we can, as far as I'm concerned, if I can do something that will just create a small awareness that might catch on to a couple of other people, and consciously person who's trying to solve this problem, because it is a dilemma for the city, and it may be a dilemma for the country. We think we solved one by electing this cat president. I mean, they all think that they've solved some deep-seated problems here. I don't think it's really solved. But that's the magnitude that New Orleans is of our problem, is that we have a deeply rooted problem that we can't see. We can see little pieces of it,
Right.
and try to solve little pieces of it at a time. But here, when we're solving this, something else is happening over there, or they're finding another way to go around it and do it some other way.
You know, one thing that might help, and I think you might agree with this, if you just had a few politicians who had some idea of what this city has produced and what this city has given to the world. I could tell you some stories about that, but the thing is, you just need, even if the mayor by himself, or even if three of the city council people, or, I mean, any combination of that, you know, right now, it's dark in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be right in the beginning already a problem? Let's say people would get together and they would plan an adequate institution like a jazz museum to honor the cultural treasure produced in the city. Right from the beginning, it would be a problem of kind of ownership, jazz, who actually started it, who. Yeah, is it an African American art? Is it whites were involved
Listen,
too? Do you think that there is also right from the beginning a problem?
I was involved with two attempts. When Boggs, I think that's what it was lobbied for this jazz park here, and I was on a commission to tell the story of jazz. And I was also involved with an attempt by Greg O'Brien of UNO, who got excited about my idea to have a jazz museum. And when I showed him that we don't have no, and he went to work and called us different. We need to have a jazz museum, you know, and all that stuff like that. In about 3 months, gone. It was all gone. It was all. But you know. And he called together, I forget this lady's name, who's the big fundraiser at the school and all that stuff. And I thought he was really going to get something going. But they also, by that time, they thought of him as a crook. Because he had already messed up some money doing with this Ogden Museum. And he told me, he said, man, right now my hands are sort of tied because I'm sort of messed up with this Ogden Museum. He had given a lot of money or something like that. Anyway.
Well, if we take it a step further, and then after that we can just finish. Why, you know, New Orleans was the biggest port for slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why don't we have a slave museum here?
Well, let me just say.
Museum of slavery, I mean.
Let me just say, the first thing you got to know is, with all the mixing and all the partying that you see in New Orleans is a very southern city. And let's start with that. And then you have to look at the fact that there's nothing meaningful in the control of African Americans or people of color in this city. Nothing. Right now. And you have to ask, perhaps, why is that? As a matter of fact, most decisions, even if an African American is controlling or is the front man or front person for an entity, he or she has to get the permission of other people before he or she makes the decision. I just had that happen last year. So I know that it still happens like that. Now, in other southern cities, I'm telling you, it's different. And you wonder what is why is that, why is New Orleans still stuck in that? It's a very parochial city, and I don't know if that's part of the challenge or, but I know that there's definitely, you have to say that that's probably some racist or racial overtones that are a part of that. I mean, there are a lot of things that you could probably look at. I think New Orleans never had, like Atlanta and some other southern cities, they never had that series of meetings where they got the more powerful Caucasians and the big people of color get together and try to iron out their differences. They never had that here, and perhaps that may be a good place to start. I know they did it in Atlanta. They were doing it more than a decade ago in Macon. Other cities had their forums where they worked out things, where they really realized that they wanted to give minority people or people of color a certain percentage of the city contracts or federal contracts, that kind of thing. That never happened here. And then you have the whole corruption thing that feeds all of that. You know, you have maybe one or two people who control all the cement things. You know what I mean? And it's just so innate. It's so inherent. It's been like that for centuries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you also think that there's a different way of the blacks and whites in the city see their past different? Have different memories, cultural memories of their past?
Certainly.
Let me just quickly, just a 3-second story. Yesterday I saw somebody's plantation home, 1810,
Yes.
right on the river, and a white male is renovating this house to the absolute detail of 1910, including furniture, including the shotgun, and he knows exactly what was in there because of documentation. He's going to rebuild the kitchen house. He's going to rebuild the vegetable garden. He knows exactly what kind of plants were there because he did analysis of the ground. He does everything exactly like it was in 1910, except the slave quarters.
1810.
Sorry,
1810,
1810, except the slave quarters.
Well,
What does that show?
that doesn't surprise me. That fits exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. You see, there's an entitlement component that it's hard to get around here, and part of the reason why we're stuck in this whole situation is the type of education that people have gotten here. You know, the type of education that whites got before integration, so-called integration, the type of education that blacks got before and after integration, because a lot of that changed in a way, but it really, I mean, blacks, or people of color here know that they don't control stuff here. They know it. And it's not like in some cities where you think you have a certain amount of freedom, and you can take what you think and maybe mobilize it or use it to get to a different place. Here, I think it's, if you play music, you have the freedom to make music. You don't necessarily, as long as you stay here, you don't necessarily, except in a very few instances, you don't make a lot of money here with that. Because, again, the entitlement thing comes in. And, you know, people think that they're entitled to just get you to do entertainment for them. You know, you're just, that's it. You know, and if you happen to be a wonderful musician and you're illiterate, then you wind up sometimes signing things that will cause you to be more like an indentured servant. And that's not just in New Orleans necessarily, but it's very pervasive here. And, you know, that's just what I've observed over the decades.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay, you're quite welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great stuff, guys. Yeah.
It's almost serious.
Alma, don't move. You're hooked up to your mic.